Run 9. 3, 2.
The tower said my name and I dropped the flashlight. The beam skittered across rust and weeds. Suspicion tightened my jaw. The way the voice used the exact phrase I keep when I am nervous, the clipped cadence I did not teach anyone. My hand went to the radio before my brain handed off the decision. Ethan, identify yourself. Mara on dispatch. I kept the handset at my mouth and answered with the automatic tones I use at night. Vale on site. Tower, a base I had been on highway patrol calls before, late night slips and blown fuses, but never a live broadcast that spoke my words. The first 5 minutes after the voice hit the air, I moved on muscle. Check the perimeter, check the shack, log timestamps. Those actions came because suspicion pulled at the back of my throat and would not let me stand still. I started a log on my phone, tapping a single line that would later be stamped into a maintenance record, noon, 2 hours ahead. But right then my fingers trembled and I deleted the entry twice. The tower stood like a lattice of teeth in the dark, the paint eaten away in strips. The beacon lamp dead except for the faint red flicker that kept time with my breathing. I walked the perimeter with my flashlight, pointed down the service road, and called up to the structure. The voice came back on the emergency band, clear, amplified through the tower's carrier. Ethan, you need to run. Now, the voice did not order, it begged. My mouth filled with something that tasted like copper. I said, who is this? And the transmission folded into a loop. My own low breathy cadence, the hitch I get when I'm about to explain a problem to Cole, the station manager. I could not accept it. Doubt tugged at the edges of my decision-making. Could this be a prank? Could Cole have patched in a recording? Those questions moved me toward the shack. The voice pushed me away. I kicked the gate open and the chain clinked. Gravel crunched under my boots. My radio hissed with dispatch. Vale, you good. Mara's voice carried distance and protocol. Cole is awake. Hold position and log everything. She Cole's name like a command. I answered, I'm going in. I'm going to check the transmitter. I heard a rustle in my throat, a pause I tried to hide. I felt a second emotion rise under doubt, obligation. I had signed the call sheet. I was the tech on night shift. The station's paperwork and the rural county's trust in me moved my feet toward the shack. I pushed the transmitter door and the air changed. Heat hit my palms. The metal of the door frame left a thin ring of cold on my gloves where I had gripped it. Equipment hummed at low frequency, not dead, not quite alive. Lights on 2 racks pulsed irregularly. My hand found the microphone on a desk, the black foam worn flat at the seam where I always rest my thumb. There was a splice on the cable, a fresh beige twist of tape sealed near the connector. I lifted the tape. The splice matched the brand we use at the station. I said aloud, Cole, did you touch this? And then I heard the voice behind the rack, my own voice, done to stay. Now run, Cole Reyes answered over the line before I could. Ethan, what are you seeing? His voice was clipped. There were 3 words he always used when he was trying to control a problem. Log it, document, hear them now, keep your hands steady. Tell me what you find, I told him. I described the splice, the warm transformers, the tape labeled with a scribbled time 3 hours from now. He cursed softly, do not touch the main breaker, hold position. I'm paging Sheriff Anders. Sheriff Anders' cruiser lights cut through the grass as he pulled onto the access road. He stepped out with a flashlight and a coffee thermos, the brim of his hat low. Ethan Vale, he said, reading my name off the service placard on my jacket. I've read the reports. Crews have had trouble here. His shirt collar smelled of diesel and old leather. He directly, did you hear your own voice? His question landed like a hand on my shoulder. My response was a tightening. I answered, yes. It sounded exactly like me. The sheriff's face did not betray surprise. He me about previous nights. A crew lead who left without his keys, a lineman who walked out and never returned. Each time, he said, the tower had been broadcasting something else. Doubt turned into fear when the transmitter's console blinked and a clean cassette tape ejected from a slot. The tape had a label in my handwriting and a future time stamped on the cellophane. I picked it up. The cassette was warm. I played it on the little deck in the shack. My voice came out of the cheap speakers, raw and urgent. You have to run. You can trust the shutdown. Leave now. I stopped the tape and looked at the sheriff. Cole, how I started, and Cole, hold on. Do not touch anything. Don T touched the breaker. I took the handheld back to the console and tried to power down the transmitter myself. My hands worked the toggles with practiced care, flip, hold, count, but the indicator lights brightened instead. The voice looped, then sliced into a smaller loop. It predicted the next steps I would take. You are going to try to cut power, it said. You will reach for breaker 4. You will hesitate. Run. My skin prickled in a way that made me swallow hard. I realized that the voice not only knew my words, it knew my immediate actions. A new shift arrived, from fear to disorientation. My rhythm of repair fractured. Dispatch cut into the channel. Cole, we re-seeing spike noise on our end. Remote kill failed. Mara to Vale, do not engage the panel. Do you copy? She used my call sign 3 times. The repetition had weight. I heard Cole bark into his phone. I need options. Anders, anyone on site to isolate power? Anders answered with a short report of the perimeter. No footprints beyond ours, a single set of tire tracks. We've cordoned it in. But we've lost half our signal feed. I don't know what is transmitting on the carrier. He clicked a light on his flashlight and moved toward the fence. I left the shack because choices feel smaller in the dark when you leave a door behind you. The approach road had a single figure on it, a silhouette that answered to neither sheriff nor station. The shape moved like someone wrapped in a heavy coat, hands in pockets. I called out, "Hey!" "Stop." And the figure glanced up. My flashlight caught a face for a second, not the face of a prankster, not one I recognized. It was thin and pale, eyes reflecting the beam with a wet sheen. The figure turned and walked away into the weeds. It didn't run. It didn't call back. Cole demanded answers on the radio. Ethan, tell me what you see. Ethan. His voice came through tight, 3 clipped syllables. I told him about the figure. He snapped, do not follow, do not pursue. We are mobbing the area. Anders, get your deputy to sweep the east approach. Anders answered. On it. I'll call it in. There was a 3-line exchange where they argued about protocol. Cole insisting we keep the scene intact. Anders insisting on immediate sweep. The argument ran rapid fire. 3 short lines from Cole, 4 from Anders, Mara interrupting to reconcile both. The back and forth felt like a lifeline and like a chain at once. I found the maintenance shelf and rifled for the logbook. I turned pages until a creased photograph slid out from the binding. I held it under my flashlight. My own handwriting on the back said 10:30 p.m., but the date on the edge of the print read 3 hours forward. In the photo, I was standing by the transmitter, one hand on the rack, looking toward the camera with the exact expression I wore now. My stomach flipped. Someone had recorded me doing what I was doing, with a timestamp that hadn't yet arrived. The discovery shifted my certainty again. Anger pushed aside fear. I wanted to find whoever had set the tape. Cole's tone went thin with calculation. Ethan, listen. If this is a recording loop, someone staged it to mess with you. Someone had access to the shack nails. Think Vale, who had keys. I recited names. Station interns, the previous night tech, a volunteer farmer who did odd jobs. Cole cut me off. No conjecture. Get me the breaker panel number. Anders put the station on the phone. The machinery of command clicked into place, and for a moment, that felt like safety. I approached the breaker with my tools clipped at my belt. My watch read a time that didn't match the tape's date. The breaker handle resisted when I reached for it. I felt the action in my chest slow to the beat of the loop playing in the shack. The voice came out of a speaker on top of the rack. You will reach for breaker 4. You will hesitate at the smell of ozone. You will think the break will work. It my name like a private thing, and the world narrowed to the metal in my hands. I did not pull the breaker down. I let the handle sit in the arc of my grip. A new sound reached the compound, tires skidding on gravel. Anders called into his radio. Approaching vehicle. On the service road heading west. Siren off. Could be local. The figure on the road stopped moving. I heard footsteps on my side of the fence. I swore and turned. The unknown person had returned, holding something small and metallic that caught the light like a knife. The Taos broadcast accelerated into a rapid countdown clipped to my voice. 30 seconds, it said. The words were not passive, they were timing. 20, it counted. The radio in my hand vibrated. Cole snapped. Move! Now? Anders moved toward the service road with his flashlight angled into the grain of night. Mara's voice came over the channel like a razor. Ethan, get back in the shack. Seal the door, I ran. My boots dug into the soil. I slammed the door behind me and bolted the deadbolt. My breathing came through the mic in uneven bursts. Inside, the transmitter room felt narrower. The racks hummed. The tape continued to spool, warming against its own plastic. The countdown loop tightened into my ear. It said the exact words I had just spoken to dispatch 2 minutes ago. The voice was from seconds and minutes ahead, layered and stacked. I could see the sheriff's light making a stripe across the door, small window. Then a knock, rapid, not polite. Ethan, open up. Anders called. Ethan, it's Anders. We need to isolate the transmitter. I kept my hands on the console. I'm in here, I said. Anders, check the east berm. Someone's moving off the road, he answered, short. Cole says Don T open until reinforcements arrive. The voice on the tower cut me off mid-sentence with a fragment of my own voice, begging for distance. My mouth formed a line. I felt nausea and an odd clarity. If the tower could play my future, then my choices were being anticipated. That knowledge demanded a different move. I reached for the little metal key on my ring that opens the panel to the external feed. I had used that key a dozen times. The metal was worn smooth on one side. I pressed the key into the feed port and turned. The lock gave with a click. The tower sloop switched to a new message, a quiet line, older, sounding, layered with static. If you cut the feed, you will break the chain. If you break the chain, you alter what comes next. My thumb slipped on the key. I looked at Cole on the handset. Cole, the feed lock responded. What do we do? He answered with the kind of voice managers use when they have to choose between lives and liabilities. Isolate the external feed only. Do not cut the main power. Anders, keep the perimeter sealed. Ethan, get out if it tells you to run. No heroics. The loop accelerated and then stuttered. My own voice, soon into the carrier, predicted a shout that would come from outside, an approaching figure cutting through the fence. The knock on the transmitter door turned into a ram. The unknown figure smashed a shoulder against the wood, and the sound of splintered fiber filled the room. Glass on an overhead fixture shattered, and a dust cloud fell like small hail. I grabbed the microphone and said, Mara, we are breached. Breach at the door. I'm into the console, but the feed grabbed my words and played them back, delayed by a breath that had already happened. Everything happened faster. Anders shoved his shoulder into the splintered door and pulled the figure free into the light. For a second I saw the face up close. Raked cheekbones, eyes red, rimmed, breath steaming cold. The sheriff's hands were steady as he cuffed the person, who made no noise and offered no resistance. Anders called out, Cole, we've got someone. They had a chunk of tape and a small transmitter. We found it in their coat. Cole barked back questions at a speed that surprised me. Is it the Aldermen bands? Was it an internal splice? Who's been here? Anders answered, no it yet. They won T-talk. I reached down and picked up the small transmitter Anders held out. It was warm and had a loop of tape wound inside, labeled with my name and the same future timestamp. The discovery felt like a pivot. Trick, sabotage, harassment, something human. I felt anger sharp enough to steady my hands. I told Cole over the mic, we found a device. It's someone on site, he replied. Secure them, Ethan. Get their hands off that machine. I'll hit the remote diagnostic. The person Anders had detained repeated one phrase over and over, low and monotone, and it was not in English. They mouthed it, and then, after a half-second, the mouth formed my words. You have to run. The moment broke whatever sensible explanation we had been building. The detainees' lips moved with the cadence of my speech, then their voice folded into the carrier and layered with the already running loops. Anders' face went blank. Bring them out to the cruiser. We'll run a check. I watched as they escorted the detainee across the gravel. The detainee's hands were empty, but the motion of their shoulders was the same one I make when I stand at a mic and tell a story I do not want to tell. Cole's phone vibrated hard enough that he set it down. He read something and then said, "We have a maintenance log entry filed from this shack with Ethan's handwriting and a note that said, 'Do not trust shutdown,' and a time stamp 2 hours from now." Who had that? I could not answer. I had no idea who had put my handwriting in a future tense. I felt my certainty collapse into a raw state. Fear, then a short, grinding resolve to not be a recorded relic. Cole moved people, set radios to private, called out to county equipment. He did what managers do: divide, assign, control. He looked at me and said plainly, "Vale, if that loop has your voice in it from the future, then someone is trying to make you perform a role. Your behavior is part of the script. Do not follow the script." His eyes were steady. I nodded. Anger spurred me to action. Anger and a new kind of decision, to test, not to obey blindly. I asked Cole for permission to run a manual isolation of the feed. He hesitated, said no, then relented. Anders stayed outside with his deputy. Mara stayed on the line. The three of us formed a human sandwich around the transmitter. I felt the weight of my signature items in my pockets. My keyring with embossed, the duct, taped flashlight, the cheap digital watch. These were small proofs of a life that might yet be taken. I took a breath and turned the key in the external feed again, this time with the intention to leave the main breakers untouched and the shack intact. As soon as the feed isolated, the loop and the cassette stuttered and then collapsed into a single short fragment. My voice whispering my name, followed by a soft metallic click that matched the sound of the detainee's small transmitter. On the carrier, something slipped into that pause, a voice I did not recognize at all, older and quieter. "Do not run unless you mean to leave. If you leave pieces behind." The room held that sentence like a new object. For a moment I thought I could attribute everything to human devices. A prankster, a saboteur, someone with access and motive. But the looped recordings included phrases I had not yet spoken and a photograph stamped with my future action that remained unexplained. Cole walked to the doorway and called out into the compound, "We need an evidence bag now." Mara, flag this call for forensic. Anders, secure the detainee and look for more devices. He did not look at me when he said, "Do not approach the tower until maintenance arrives." No heroics, Vale. His orders were a thin shield around me and around the work we still had to do. I folded my hands into the pocket radio until my nails whitened. Fear returned, then the narrowness of a technician's focus, the requirement to do a job well even while your world rearranged. The detainees' eyes followed me as they were led away. I thought I saw a flicker of recognition there, an echo of the way I watch my own reflection when I am rehearsing a voice. They mouthed something, and then the sheriff closed the cruiser door. Mara quietly over the net, "Cole, we are documenting everything. Ethan, do you copy?" I answered. The tape on the console continued to spool, a tiny mechanical heartbeat. The fear in me settled into a steady, practical edge. I began to inventory evidence: tape, splice photograph, small transmitter, detainee, timestamp. Each item anchored the threat into something we could touch. When dawn came, the compound looked different because the light changed. What remained was a loop of my voice on the air and a line of radio chatter read back as evidence. Dispatch logged calls. Cole read through the maintenance book and pointed at the photo again. This proves someone staged this. We will run full diagnostics at base, but you will not be alone at the next check, Vale. Anders added, we'll leave a patrol here until daylight. We'll check the west approach in an hour. Mara closed files on her desk and typed into the record. I stood by the tower with the duct, taped flashlight in my hand. The cassette sat in an evidence bag. The sheriff closed the cruiser door and said, Cole, we should tow the tower offline until morning. Put it on a hold. Cole nodded. Do it. Mara, flag an incident. Everyone, we log every movement. He looked at me and said, you did right by calling it in. I wanted to say I had failed by being recorded, by letting my future be predicted. Instead I said, Cole, lock the maintenance log in a safe. I want copies distributed. He agreed. The last thing I heard before I left the compound was my own voice on a loop, thin through the night band. You have to run. Anders shut off his flashlight and said, he's gone, but not about me. He meant the detainee who had been released by procedure rather than being held. Cole tapped the folder and said, we document, we isolate, we hand off to forensics. Do the job and stay alive. I nodded and walked to my truck. The tower's carrier carried a fragment of my voice as I climbed in. Run, it said. Then the line hissed into static. I set the radio to our private band and left the compound with the maintenance logs sealed in evidence, the photograph still warm in my pocket, and the recorded plea fading behind me. The transmission looped on the air after I drove away. Mara stayed on frequency until the log time matched the tape's stamp. When I reached the highway, I cut the engine and listened to the channel once more. The carrier carried only static and the vague outline of my voice, repeating that single demand. The sheriff's call came in my ear. Vale, report in when you make it to town. I replied with my coordinates and then cut the channel. The last concrete sound I registered before I turned the key and left was the tape clicking in its bag and the sheriff saying, we're refiling this as Incident 20. 1, 2, 3, the file would be opened. The tower would still be there. My name would be on a spool of magnetic tape that said I had been warned and that someone, or something, had recorded the warning first. I drove the service road out into light that did not answer the questions we had gathered like debris. The photograph in my pocket had a time stamp on its edge. The cassette in the evidence bag had a label with my handwriting. Outside, the morning wind moved the dry grass. Inside me, a different part of the night stayed on, registering the way the carrier had said my name, the precise breath pattern I make before I speak, and the caution that law and log could not fully remove. As I hit the highway, Cole's last instruction played on rotation in my head. Do not follow the script. I folded that line into my plan and drove toward town, while the tower behind me kept its loop alive, broadcasting my name into the empty sky. The sheriff slammed his fist on the truck roof and barked, "What the hell is on that tower?" I jerked the flashlight. The beam cut a hard line across rusted steel and weeds. Suspicion tightened my jaw the way it had the night before, when that voice said my name, and I dropped the flashlight. I answered the sheriff without thinking. It came from up there. Sheriff Lyle leaned into the cab, rain clinging to his jacket, and repeated my name like he wanted it to mean something real. "Ethan Vale, identify yourself." Now, I told him my name. My hand shook once and I tightened my grip on the worn flashlight until the tape on its handle dug into my thumb. Suspicion is the engine of what I did next. I had to prove the signal wasn't a prank. I twisted the radio on the dash and keyed the feed into the tower receiver. The tower answered. It played a clipped, urgent version of my own voice. "Run. Run now." Dante looked back. The phrase used the exact cadence I used when I tried to quiet myself on bad nights. I hadn't said it. The timestamp on the playback read 2 minutes ahead of my watch. Sheriff Lyle cursed and felt my radio to his ear. "That's you," he said. "That's you, Ethan. How is that you?" I said. "I don't know," and that was the only true thing I could offer. We all heard the same recording loop twice more. The flashlight beam skittered across bolts and an old maintenance plaque. The plaque had our station ID, the same logo stamped on the keyring on my belt. Every small concrete detail anchored me. The tower used pieces of my life to speak. I introduced myself in the next few sentences without ceremony because there was no time. I used to handle dead towers for the county and for the private contractor who held the emergency broadcast contract. My routine was diagnostic. Check feed, confirm power, climb ladder if needed, report back. That night I had driven out to the tower because the central station lost its beacon after midnight. I had already told Cara Mendes at the remote feed center I'd be out there for the hour and to keep the line open. I reminded myself of that in the cab while the sheriff kept his hand on the radio. Sheriff Lyle's voice stayed low and hard. "You knew midnight might be a problem, Ethan. You knew that call could come in. Why would you be out here alone?" He my name twice more, and each time the word felt like a test. I answered in short sentences. I was scheduled. I drove out. I checked the breaker first. I pointed to the service road behind us where my truck's tire tracks sagged in the soft shoulder. He looked at the tracks, then at the tower, and then at me. "Did you climb it?" A memory from 2 nights earlier hit without warning. The tower had spoken my name before, and I had dropped the flashlight then too. I had told Radio Center about it. They logged it. That previous recorded line sat in my head like a technical note you can't ignore. My suspicion deepened into a sharper question. If the tower could say my name, could it make something else happen? I tightened the flashlight again and checked the small weathered radio clipped to my belt. Cara Mendes came on the secure line half a minute later. Her voice had the clinical cadence of someone who worked nights and fed signals for a living. "Ethan, I am receiving an active feed from Tower 392. It's not a simulcast, the carrier's local. Playback shows a live loop originating at the lattice." "Are you at the base?" She wanted facts. I gave them. The truck, the sheriff, the plaque, the timestamp. "Cara, I am patching it to Ramirez." "Hold your position." She sounded steady and exact. Ramirez's voice arrived a second later, low and brittle. "Preserve the signal. Do not cut power. Do not touch the transmitter. Cara, log everything." He used the procedures the company drilled into us. That order created a conflict immediately. Ramirez's priority was evidence. The sheriff's priority was safety. Deputy Harris pulled up in a second cruiser and stomped over. The deputy had a flashlight on low and a tack light clipped to his jacket. "Cut the power. Pull the line. If that thing's broadcasting future events, we shut it off now," Ramirez answered by quoting emergency broadcast protocol. We could not sever an active's feed without authorization. He it with the practiced calm of someone who knew enough law to stall action and buy time. Harris barked, "We don't have time for bureaucracy." People could get hurt. Ramirez's tone tightened. "If you cut it and it was evidence, you destroy our only link to what happened. We preserve and then decide." The argument tightened the night into a staccato of orders and counter-orders. The exchange became a small firefight of words. "Harris, you want to stand here and log someone's murder." Ramirez, "We log it and hand it to law enforcement." Harris, "That doesn't help us now." Ramirez, "We don't know now yet." I watched the 2 men trade short lines like blows. There were 5 quick, clipped sentences exchanged before Sheriff Lyle raised his hand and demanded we move. "Enough. Nobody goes up alone. No one climbs until we have a plan. Ethan, you stay in the truck and keep that feed open. Cara, record everything." The sheriff sorta cut the argument down but left the choice unresolved. Preserve or destroy. Cara opened a remote stream into my tablet and dropped a playback into the cab. Her screen showed a waveform rising and falling. "Listen. This is not a repeat copy." I pulled a 3-minute buffer. "There's ambient audio on the track I can hear from your truck, the door creak, the flash of your engine warming. then a voice overlay saying, "Done to look back." The timestamps place a portion of the speech 90 seconds ahead of your local time. Her hands moved fast on the keys. Ramirez leaned in despite his insistence on protocol. "Play it again," he said. Kara isolated a phrase and looped it. The loop contained a cough I recognized, my own cough from earlier when I climbed out of the cab the previous night. The cough sat between the words like a marker. My doubt folded into a new, colder feeling. I stopped pretending I could treat this as a standard equipment failure. The waveform began to predict micro-events. Kara opened a live feed overlay that showed short textual descriptors for the audio: door slam, vehicle idling, wind gust. As she watched, the overlay labeled a coming sound: footstep on gravel, and a second later a footstep scuffed exactly by the passenger door of my truck. We all heard it. Ramirez swore and swore again. "It's predicting us," he said. "The feed is registering events seconds before they happen." His hands hovered over the console like he might touch the tower and fracture something. I climbed the first few rungs with my headlamp tight to my brow because someone needed to confirm the transmitter. The sheriff refused to come up. He stayed at the base and kept his shotgun across his lap. The deputy circulated the perimeter and kept the road open. Halfway up the ladder, I found a small taped portable recorder wedged into a weld on the crossbeam. Its foam windshield had insect corpses stuck to it. A strip of duct tape held it to the metal. When I nudged it, it clicked on and my voice, clear and measured, began to speak into it. "If you're hearing this, Dante, go to the beacon. Run." The recording carried a secondary sound: the scrape of my truck on gravel and the clack of my briefcase locking. The recorder also held a phrase I had not yet said standing there on that ladder. My stomach went cold enough that my hands slipped on the rung. I wanted to tear the recorder off and smash it. Instead, I called down, "Sheriff, I found a recorder mid-ladder." "It's playing my voice?" Lyle answered in a clipped tone. "Dante, touch it." "Dante, pull it down." "Ramirez, preserve." Ramirez's voice came over my headset, too low and sharp. "Ethan, document it. Take photos. Keep your distance." "Kara, timestamp everything." I obeyed because obedience felt like action. I took photos. My thumbs trembled. The camera's flash made the recorder's plastic sweat. I noted the tape pattern and the insect grimes. Concrete details. The recorder played one more loop, and then a low hum undercut everything. Back on the ground, we moved into a protocol standoff. Ramirez insisted we stay long enough to preserve the signal for chain of custody. Deputy Harris wanted the power cut. Kara fed us live spectral analysis on her tablet while she fed the audio to a secure server. The waveform began to anticipate small choices: my hand reaching for the recorder, the sheriff flashlight swinging left. Then the feed labeled a future line I had not yet spoken, and then played it 2 seconds before my lips formed the words. The time lag shrank. A predicted phrase became audible before any of us had registered the act it described. Harris leaned in and asked Ramirez, "Are you telling me we stand here and listen while it narrates what we do next?" Ramirez did not look like a man who could be ordered. He looked like a man holding the only leverage he had. "We log. We analyze. If we cut power and it keeps broadcasting elsewhere, we've lost our best forensic piece." Harris spat. "If it broadcasts someone as last minutes, you're going to keep the microphone on?" Ramirez's reply was sharp and practical. "If we pull it, we may erase evidence that explains why it is broadcasting. We can afford to destroy data." The argument unfolded in tight, human lines, 3 quick exchanges that felt like a trial. Kara's face, lit by the tablet glow, was the only one doing the math out loud. If the feed is predictive, because it samples local audio and then plays it forward, there's a loop delay mechanism somewhere in the system. If we can find its source, we might stop the prediction." She paused and then said, "If it's pulling from me, then our remote node is compromised. If it's pulling from Ethan, then it's at the tower acting like a time offset transmitter. Ramirez, which is worse. Kara, both are bad. One means a breach in our network. The other means the physical tower is doing something outside our engineering models. That line, outside our engineering models, made the night less theoretical and more dangerous. No one left a packet. We argued because arguing kept us doing something besides running. But then the tower changed its pitch. The lattice at the apex emitted a low frequency pulse that didn't register as sound so much as it registered inside the molars. Lights along the access road dimmed. My cheap digital watch stuttered. The pulse knocked out the cab light. A minute later the main beacon shuddered and went dark. A long shadow peeled away from the tower lattice and separated like a smear of oil on glass. It moved across the grass in a way that matched none of our familiar motions. Sheriff Lyle shouted, "Move!" And the word landed like a bell. The tower blasted a recording of me mid-run. It was a voice I recognized. Ragged, breathless, pleading, "Please, please, Dante, get out of here. Run now, run!" The line matched a pattern of a recording in the buffer with a timestamp 3 minutes in the future. The pulse hit again and the sheriff's truck stalled. The deputy's flashlight flared and died. We tried our radios, the channels filled with static. Light from the tower flicked in a hard red, then a slow blood-tinged blink. Someone shoved my shoulder, and I went from measured to physical. I dropped the tool bag and broke into a run down the service road because the recording had become a live event. We sprinted across damp grass under a sky I could not easily describe because there was no poetry in the act of running. There were only concrete things. My coat snagging on barbed wire, my boots sucking in mud, Ramirez nearly tripping over a toolbox he had refused to leave behind. Sheriff Lyle kept calling names. "Ethan! Harris! Move!" The voice on the tower chased us with breathing and names. At one point I glanced back and saw a dark shape detach and streak across the field toward us. We dropped into 2 vehicles and peeled away with tires tossing clods of wet earth. I slammed the truck into drive and glanced in the cab mirror. On the passenger seat the portable recorder we had left playing in the rush blinked red and kept looping my voice. Kara through the open line. "It's still on. The feed didn't stop when you left. Ramirez, catalog what you can. We leave a remote node and monitor. We cannot destroy the chain." Harris was quiet and breathing fast. In the dawn we found a county road and kept moving because movement felt like choice. The argument ended through motion, not words. Inside the truck the radio streamed the tower feed with a calm, clinical crackle underneath the pleading voice. The dashboard clock backed up the timestamps and showed the same future offsets. Kara kept feeding us updates. Ramirez made decisions. "We catalog," he said. "We preserve the signal and we monitor remotely. We don't set the tower to burn or cut the power now. We leave evidence in place. Harris, we drive away and let it run." Ramirez's answer was procedural. "We can risk destroying the evidence. We have to learn what it wants from us." Harris spat something and leaned his forehead against the steering wheel. The uneasy truce formed around a single practical plan. We would abandon the site, but maintain a remote listener. Kara spun up a secure node and authorized a continuous buffer. Ramirez assigned chain of custody and told the sheriff's office to post a temporary perimeter. The decision shifted responsibility from the immediate field to a networked team. In the cab, the portable recorder continued to click and repeat my voice. I reached forward and grabbed it with a hand that trembled, and then set it on the passenger seat, because removing it felt like admitting I couldn't control what the tower did. We drove and cataloged. We took notes with short, clinical lines. Ramirez demanded filer names. Kara called out at timestamps. Sheriff Lyle called the county dispatcher and described the perimeter. Deputy Harris kept his hand on his radio, like something to hold when the world didn't make sense. The feed predicted a small event, and then labeled it. Engine cough, light flicker, truck tire squeal. Seconds later the truck ahead of us skidded on loose gravel and a light popped. Ramirez cursed and then wrote the line down. We all moved from suspicion to dread, then to a brittle compliance. doing steps because someone must do them. Before dawn, I found a moment to breathe and to note a detail that had been there since the ladder recorder. The duct tape on my flashlight, the embossed station ID on my keyring, the worn stitching on my jacket cuff. The tower used these ordinary artifacts in its speech. It stitched my life into its message. That realization changed doubt into a low, angry protectiveness. I said it out loud. It keeps using me, Ramirez. It uses what it can get. Document everything. Do not throw hardware away. Harris slammed his palm into the dash. We left a recorder on the ground and walked away. He said, voice flat. We didn't take it. We drive like nothing happened. Kara gave us a quieter twist I didn't expect. Ethan, listen. The buffer shows one clip that replays a private phrase you say when you're nervous. Someone else couldn't have known it without being with you in a confined space. Either someone sat with you in the cab the other night, or the tower samples your micro, ambient feed and broadcasts it offset in time. I stared at the window and tried to remember every person who had ever climbed into my truck. My memory offered small, sharp items. An old contractor who de-changed a fuse, a kid I trained once who left his coffee mug, nights by the station when I ate sandwiches at my dash. The tower's access into those moments felt like a violation rather than a miracle. Ramirez organized our exit into an evidence plan. He named personnel and tasks. Kara would hold the live buffer. She would write logs and timestamps. The sheriff would secure a perimeter and assign deputies to patrol. Harris would file an incident report and maintain a security posture. I would file a technical report detailing the ladder recorder, its adhesive pattern, and the way it echoed my voice. We made lists and we obeyed the lists because lists feel like control. We left the tower behind with its beacon failing, and with a recorder we had not retrieved. On the shoulder of the access road, I thumbed the metal keyring on my belt until the raised letters blurred. The recorder's looped voice still leaked through the cabin speakers. I reached and switched the tablet off because even the sound of my own voice chasing me made my mouth dry. Ramirez, we catalog and monitor. We don't touch the hardware until the lab arrives. The sheriff turned the garrison lights on as we passed, and the deputy kept his shotgun across his lap. The truck's tires chewed the road. At the county line, Kara, buffer S storing, we'll flag the segment that matches your live plea. Ramirez, authorized chain of custody. Ramirez's voice came hollow with an authority I recognized. Responsibility, authorized. The archive gets the feed. No one hands it to the press. We keep this tight, Harris grunted. He wanted the power cut, but he accepted the plan. We drove until the recorder's looped voice faded into static, and then silence for 30 seconds, then came back on again. Kara, it's still broadcasting from the tower. We were getting continuous packets. I let my head fall back against the seat and focused on a single concrete thing. The recorder's foam windshield was smeared with insect wings. That small, ugly detail stuck in my mind like a nail. Someone or something had placed its microphone where it could hear my breath and my boots. Ramirez, we leave everything in place. We document. We monitor. I repeated the order aloud to remember it. The team chose preservation over destruction. The decision gave us a plan and robbed us of immediate safety. We had moved the problem into procedure. The tower continued to speak in offsets. Our records logged predictive lines and future timestamps. The sheriff issued a temporary watch. Kara fed remote audio into a secure archive and labeled the segments. Ramirez sent instructions to the lab team to arrive at first light. Deputy Harris drove slowly behind us, keeping distance like a guard. When we finally pulled onto the highway and left the county lights behind, the cab settled into a tired hum. Ramirez, we did what we could. We left a listening node. We logged the recorder. We want to destroy evidence until the lab gets here. I had no better plan. My hands flexed on the steering wheel, as if I could squeeze logic out of leather. The last concrete event of the night was simple and sharp. The recorder on the passenger seat clicked and repeated my voice once more, then stopped. In that instant, Kara's voice came through the line and said, "It's still on." "The loop didn't stop after you left," I swallowed. "Then Sheriff Lyle, keep driving." I kept driving because moving felt like action, and because standing still meant listening to a voice that promised a future it had already spoken. The red beacon flared and a voice over the carrier called my name, precise and impatient. "Ethan, climb now." Suspicion tightened my hands around the flashlight and I didn't move. Sheriff Cole cursed and shoved at the tower gate. Deputy Marla Dyers readied the pry bar. Lena on dispatch asked, "What is that on your feed?" And my throat answered before I could shape the thought. I had suspicion in the first breath, because the voice matched the way I clipped my syllables when I am nervous. That match matters. It pushed me into action. I stepped forward with the pry bar because not moving felt like accepting whatever the carrier wanted. My boot hit a rusted grate and the sound scattered across the yard. I kept my flashlight low. I kept checking my pocket radio even though I told myself it was dead. We'd been at the tower to fix a dead emergency broadcast. My shift job was to diagnose failing transmitters and patch carrier loops. The tower had been silent for weeks until our signal logs showed a carrier flicker. That flicker is why Sheriff Cole drove out at 2 in the morning and why Marla was watching the base of the tower with her hands on her hips. I had my metal keyring and the pocket screwdriver set. My watch read 2:04 am when the beacon flared. "Ethan, identify yourself," Cole barked, slamming the truck door to make contact sound. He kept saying my name the way men who still expect you to be answerable say names. Marla's jaw set. I could feel Lena on the handheld, her voice thin through static. The immediate conflict was whether we treated the transmission as equipment failure or as a hazard. That question hung between us, and every decision flowed from it. Cole went to the gate and Marla wedged the pry bar. I knelt at the shack and tried the door latch. The voice came again from the tower, not buried now, but riding the carrier clean. A clipped count that matched a rhythm I sometimes used while testing equipment. It 3-2 and stopped. I dropped the pry bar for a second and the flashlight slipped out of my hand. I cursed and picked it up. Marla lunged at the latch and the door gave with a splintering sound. Inside the transmitter shack, the rack lights were alive. Fans spun and a dead rack hummed. A looped carrier bled through the speakers with my own cadence in the carrier. A tape deck still ran, spooling a length of magnetic tape that looked older than any we kept in inventory. My hands found the rack's power breaker and my fingers felt the residual heat of active electronics. "It's broadcasting me," I said. My voice sounded flat to my own ears. "It is using my voice pattern." Lena's reply came clipped. "Show me the feed, Ethan. Send me a dry patch." "What are the timestamps?" I passed the handheld back to Cole and grabbed the nearest microphone to patch to the truck. Cole shoved a flashlight into my back and said, "Get it down or we walk." He my name again in the way men use names when they plan to be in command. The first tension shift hit when Marla found a label tucked behind a rack. A maintenance log stamped with a date in the future. She read it aloud without meaning to. "Next check 31st of May." My hand slid off the breaker. The log sync looked fresh. Lena swore in the feed and demanded we pull the files. The timestamp on the recording embedded in the carrier post dated our arrival by 17 minutes. I double-checked. I watched the metadata scroll and felt the room press against me. Doubt crept in then. Doubt was not a thought but a series of small actions. Rubbing my temple, flicking the radio to test modulation, stepping back from the rack as if distance might unhook causality. I told myself it was a glitch. Cole argued we cut power. Marla argued we preserve the carrier for evidence. The argument turned sharp and fast. "We cut it now." Cole, his voice hard. "We shut it down and haul whatever's left back to the station." His fingers found the breaker handle and his jaw worked. "We keep it live." Marla shot back. "If that's future." Stamped. "We log it. Someone else needs to see it besides us." "Lena, you hearing me?" "I hear you." Lena's voice came from my ear with the calm of someone at a desk who has to translate panic into procedure if it's future metadata. We patched to county comms. Keep it touching evidence chain, her words pushed against Cole's fist on the breaker. They argued 3 rounds, quick exchanges where I had to say their names to keep track. Cole, we can't just kill it. Marla, you want to walk into an active transmitter. Lena, tell us the protocol now. Each line took up the air and shifted the room's balance. The argument knocked me sideways until the tower spoke again and overlaid the exact scrape of someone's boot on the tower ladder. A noise only someone standing behind me could have made. I turned. No one was there. A single metal footstep from above happened in the carrier, and my skin broke into a tight, hot patch of gooseflesh. Now fear arrived. Fear moved my hands quicker than suspicion had. It made me check the ladder bolts and the mid-platform welds. Fear was a physical tightening in my chest and a shallow, automatic breath. I climbed the ladder because the voice had told me to climb before and because moving felt like control. The climb was sound and weight and cold metal under my gloves. Marla followed with a headlamp. Cole stayed at the base and barked orders into the truck mic. Lena patched the feed to county comms and kept a running log. Halfway up, the looped carrier began to narrate our gestures in present tense. It called out, "Ethan, right hand on rung 5, Dante look left." And then it played a small scrape that matched the way Marla had shifted her weight. The carrier was layering our present actions into the broadcast and adjusting. That was when the change in the problem became clear. The tower wasn't replaying. It was predicting. Higher up, the metal rungs hummed under my boots. My breath came in short pulls. The air on the tower is always thinner. This night it tasted of machine oil and cold metal. I reached the mid-platform. Marla's headlamp painted the rust in hard white. The transmitter bezel sat open and a cable snaked out like a pale root. The carrier counted again, and this time it used my voice in a way I recognized as a future cadence, older, ragged, steady in panic. 3. The carrier said in my own tone 2. Run, my hands froze on the bezel. I reached to cut the main feed and Marla's position on the platform at shoulder height was empty. 1 second she was there adjusting a clamp, then the carrier counted down and Marla was gone. I didn't see her fall, I saw the empty space where her boot had been. I called her name. My voice sounded small. Marla! Marla, where are you? I barked. Silence answered, and then a new sound worked its way into the loop. The sheriff's earlier angry bark, clipped and threaded into the carrier between my breaths. The broadcast used his anger to push us apart. That was the twist that rearranged what we believed until then. The tower fed us our own friction back at us, using recorded moments of our conflict to split our decisions. Cole shoved the truck key at me and hissed, "Get down, Ethan." "Leave it, now." He stepped toward the ladder with a hand out. His voice had the rough edge of a man trying to hold a team together. He had already reached the point where protecting the group meant leaving equipment. I saw the calculation pass across Marla's face before she vanished. She had wanted the evidence to be preserved, and that wantedness had kept her still when the carrier decided to test the choice. I thought of the maintenance log with the future date. I thought of Lena's calm. Record everything. Timestamp everything. Do not disconnect without clearance. Her instruction felt like a tether. The carrier kept saying my name. It gave specifics, my watch reading, the way my thumb tapped the flashlight handle, the exact cadence of my breath on the mic. It knew details no routine recording should know. It used them to orchestrate movement. Panic fractured the team. We argued in short, sharp lines. Cole, we can just leave her. Marla would have wanted the evidence. Lena, do we have a search protocol? Cole shoved at the ladder. Marla's missing boot print on the platform told a different story than voices did. Someone had been pulled backward, away from the edge, not forward. The carrier had counted down to make sure we defracture. I started the climb higher, fingers numb, because staying would mean subjecting Marla to whatever the tower wanted. Lena's voice came through clearer. Ethan, if the carrier is projecting future audio, it might also be influencing motion. Don't step into a predicted trap. Her practical rationing of risk cut through everything. That was a pivot point. Lena stopped being a dispatcher and became a mitigator of the immediate hazard. At the Basel, I found the feed cable in place and a tiny recorder jammed into the rack with a hand-stitched label that read, E-Vale log. The label made my hands shake. The recorder had my voice on it, but on the playback there were syllables I had not yet spoken. A short, urgent message telling me to run. The metadata on the device matched the future, stamped entries Marla had found. The device contained a looped live feed that had been capturing us and then resequencing our own actions into commands. My mind ran through how that could be built with equipment we used, and nothing fit. This was the second emotion shift. Doubt tipped into fear and then into a brittle, strategic clarity. I pulled the recorder free. Marla's boots left a smear of dust on the platform. I told myself the only rational move was to cut the main power and remove the device. I told myself that because making measurable choices felt like influence. My hands moved, and my head hummed with the carrier saying, "Run." Then the carrier began to count in full, that ragged future voice. 3, 2, 1. It counted down the exact seconds as I reached for the breaker. I caught the sheriff reaching up with both hands to grab my forearm. Ethan, no, stop. Think. His grip was both a warning and a plea. On the platform, I had to decide between obeying the carrier's instruction and obeying the sheriff's command. We argued with quick lines and clipped names.
Cole, let go!
Ethan, you stop this now. Marla, if you can hear me, respond! Cole pushed and I twisted because my thumb had already found the breaker handle. I felt the metal shift under my palm and a live arc of sound punched at my ears. The carrier used that sound as a cue to overlay an image of Marla falling sideways and then vanishing into the grass below. That image confused my hands. I cut power out of muscle memory. Power died in a single mechanical inhale. Lights winked. The carrier stuttered and then shifted into raw static, but the static carried a final phrase in my cadence. Do not stop running. My limbs reacted before I could reason. I dropped from the platform and fell 2 rungs. Cole grabbed me and hauled me the rest of the way down, as if he was pulling a man off a track. At the base, the truck lights came on and revealed a set of prints heading away from the tower across the prairie. They were full boots and then nothing. Lena murmured over the handset that the patch to county comms had logged a fragmentary feed. A future, time-stamped call for help and a faint, high-pitched signal that the analyzer couldn't match to any known device. She read out file identifiers. The metadata filled in like a spreadsheet of impossible numbers. The third emotional shift arrived as an exhausted, granular pragmatism. I moved through tasks mechanically. I handed the recorder to Lena for immediate upload and backup. I told Cole we needed to mark the site and leave a guarded perimeter. He argued and then nodded. Marla was gone and the sheriff did not look for a rope. He checked his phone and then checked it again. I kept scanning the field for the missing deputy, for her headlamp, for a smear of blood. There was none. We left a small pile of gear, a snapped pry bar, Marla's headlamp, a coil of cable. The prints in the grass stopped in a clean arc and then dissolved into the prairie. My log entries were practical. Time, personnel, equipment, steps taken. I spoke them aloud so Lena could enter them into the archive. When I tried to describe what the carrier had done, my sentences kept breaking because saying it changed nothing about the raw facts. A voice that used my cadence, a recorder labeled with my name, a future timestamp that dated our arrival, a missing deputy. On the way back to town, Cole drove with a quiet that was not peace. He slammed his palm flat on the steering wheel once and breathed through his nose. If this gets out the wrong way, he said, it will be a circus. You understand? He used my name to anchor the sentence. I said, I get it, He kept looking at the road like he was counting exits. At the station, Lena pulled files and pushed a copy to the county archive under a time-stamped seal. We keep a chain, we don't leak, we log. She spoke like a woman who has handled sworn evidence for years. Her hands were steady. She printed forms and wrote Marla's name across an incident report with a pen that scratched fat on the paper. The county investigator came by 2 days later. He had the kind of badge that lives in a drawer and crawled out for special cases. He questions in a voice that tried for neutrality. He looked at the rack pictures Lena had uploaded, at the recorder metadata, at the list of timestamps. He frowned at the future dates and then at the photograph of Marla's headlamp lying in the grass, missing in the field. No body, no disturbance. He tapped a finger on the report and then looked at me. Ethan Vale, were you the last up that ladder? I was, I said. My voice kept a steady cadence, because practice keeps your mouth from shaking. I told him everything I could. The beacon flare, the voice in the carrier, the way Marla's boot print stopped. I did not say that the voice told me to run with the exact intonation I used when I am testing equipment under pressure. I did not tell him how the carrier used Cole's earlier anger to split our choices. I left those details to the logs, because facts on paper feel less like madness. The investigator asked me to hand over the recorder. I hesitated. I thought of the label, E. Vale log. I thought about the way the device had my voice and had also spoken words I had not yet said. I thought about Lena's cold insistence on chain of custody. I slid it across the table. You okay, Vale? Call me later, when the station had emptied. He stood by the doorway with a long coat on, the kind of coat you wear when you're trying to look like you've slept. He had red at his knuckles where he had punched the truck roof earlier. You sure you want to keep doing this? I felt a last shift in my feelings then. From raw fear to a kind of protective fatigue. Fatigue led to decision. I can to keep doing nights after this. Cole. My hands were flat on the table. Not here. Not like this. He looked at me, and for a long beat he didn't say anything. Marla remained missing. Search parties combed the prairie in daylight. Flyers went up at the post office and the grocery store. Lena oversaw the uploads and the sealed backups and came by my house twice with more forms. We did all we could with what we had. You kept your notes. I handed her a small printout of the timestamps and the log, my hands steady, because work demands steadiness. Weeks later, a county engineer inspected the tower and found a section of lattice at mid-height bent inward, as if something had shoved its way through. The damage was precise and fresh. The engineer said it could have been mechanical failure, rodent activity, or weather. He logged it as weather-related structural fatigue. The report was stamped and filed. I knew what I had seen, and I knew what the evidence said in the ledger. The twist that later emerged and changed everything in the community came from a different angle. A neighboring county recovered a fragment of a carrier that had been picked up intermittently on their edge of range monitors. Their digital analyst found a patchwork. Segments of our transmissions mixed with audio from other sources, including a dispatcher's voice from 3 towns over and a sheriff's shout from a recorded road stop months earlier. Someone had assembled these segments into a patchwork command and then encoded timestamps that slid forward in time. The conclusion was blunt. Someone had been using broadcast architecture to create directed predictions, an experiment or an exploit. That answer explained method, but not motive. Lena called me the morning their file came in. They found a splice, she said, not supernatural, technical manipulation. But the timestamps are still wrong. She read me the analyst's notes. They can build a device to predict short sequences by using sensory input and predictive routing. But they're not supposed to be able to write our future like a script. Her voice went quiet. They can map likely movement, Ethan. But they can know how someone will choose to move when under stress. I thought of Marla and of the way the tower had used our arguments against us. I thought of the maintenance log stamped with a future date and the little recorder stuck into the rack. If the technology could map probable movement, then our choices had been run against a model and then fed back at speed. That implied someone had not only tested the model on equipment, but had also used it on people. We convened a small group: Lena, Cole, a county engineer, and me. The meeting felt like a trial. We brought printed copies of the metadata. We brought the recorder's binary readout and a transcript of the carrier. The engineer showed diagrams of carrier routing and of how timestamps can be manipulated using buffer queues and known latencies. His explanation was technical and dry, which somehow made it harder to deny. You can simulate likely human behavior by training on past actions, he said. But you can produce precise, future, stamped audio without a feedback loop that includes the subjects. So we were the test subjects, Lena. Either test subjects or victims, Cole replied. We argued in short lines again, using names. Lena, who would run this? Cole, do we involve state? Ethan, will you testify on the logs? The back and forth decisions. We decided to hand everything to state communications under sealed evidence, and we agreed to leave the site marked and to limit divulgence. We did this because the recordings were dangerous in the wrong hands, and because the model that could feed predictions back into a community was bigger than any one of us. My own arc closed in a private way. I returned to the tower one last time in daylight with a county engineer and a camera. The tower looked ordinary in the sun. Rust, paint flakes, the beacon socket empty. I walked the perimeter and found the coil of tape half buried in the grass where we left it. I picked it up. The coil had that specific smell of demagnetized tape and prairie dust. I carried it back to the truck and then to Lena. Lena took the coil and placed it into an evidence envelope. She wrote the case number and her initials. She folded the corners just so. Her hands moved with the authority of someone who knows how to make things matter in paper form. We keep a chain. We keep the record. That will be the only thing we'll have to explain what happened to Marla. She did not promise more. Her voice held a steady rationality. Cole left town 3 months later. He had options elsewhere. He called once to check on the county uploads. He didn't return my call after that. Lena stayed with the archive work and rose through the ranks. Her competence made her safe inside a bureaucracy. I quit night shift. I could no longer stand the silence between carrier flickers. I boxed my tools and handed my keyring with the embossed station ID to the station manager. My hands shook when I did it, but not the way they had on the platform. I kept the final recorder only as evidence I could hold. The small plastic device with a label that read my name. I kept it in a desk drawer under a set of printed logs. Sometimes in the quiet hours I would pull it out and press play. It would produce static and the same ragged future voice that had told me to run. It would count and then it would stop. Once, in a fit of unbearable habit, I whispered the phrase I had heard back into it and watched the lead needle spike. The device did not answer me with any new command. It only looped the fragments it already carried. Months passed, and the investigation closed with a set of sealed recommendations and a classified note that said the tower's anomaly was to be monitored for replication. The county engineer recommended physical modifications to local towers and a review of regional carrier security. The state accepted the recommendation and assigned a team to review predictive routing exploits. They never released a public statement connecting our tower to those recommendations. The last concrete thing I did in that story was record a short log with the transmitter still live on a battery pack and walk away toward the low ridge as dawn broke. The dawn had a thin blue light that made the prairie look washed and small. I spoke into the recorder with hands that were steady because I had rehearsed what to say. This is Ethan Vale. Time is 5:08 am. Tower beacon failed a minute ago. Carrier contained my voice and future, stamped metadata. Deputy Marla Diaz is missing. Sheriff Cole present. Recorder and chain of custody maintained by Lena Morales. Evidence uploaded to county comms. I am leaving the scene. I am leaving on foot toward County Road 3. And log, I hit stop and clipped the recorder into my pocket. I walked toward the road with my flashlight off because the horizon was beginning to show. The tower rose behind me, a lattice of metal and a single empty beacon socket. The tower emitted faint fragments of my voice in static as I moved, but the fragments were incomplete, like broken commands that had lost their power when the feed died. I did not look back. I kept my steps measured and my hands empty. When I reached the county road, a patrol car took me home. I handed over the recorder and the coil of tape. Lena filed the last form and closed the case binder with a single clip. Cole's name remained in my phone. I removed it. Marla's name remained in the missing persons file. I learned to live with specific facts. The maintenance log with a future date, the broken section of lattice, the coil of tape in evidence. I learned to leave the rest to people whose job was to make meaning out of impossible things. I keep a copy of the transcript in a locked file. I keep the habit of checking my pocket radio when wind moves through the grass. Sometimes at 3 in the morning, I still wake to the sensation of a counting voice lined up behind my breath. I do not answer it. The recorder sits in a padded envelope in the county archive now, labeled and sealed. Lena me once, we treat these files like anything else, catalogued, sealed, referenced. We done dramatize them. She was right. The chain mattered. Paper mattered. Names mattered. I closed my final log the way a man seals evidence. I walked out across the prairie and kept my hands empty. The tower kept talking in fragments nobody could follow. I turned my back and went home. End log.